That's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the Accident Guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? The Accident Guys can come to you almost anywhere, so you don't have to come to us. Se habla español.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers take a 4-game winning streak into the All-Star break. They're back in first place in the NL West for the first time since June 5th. They lead Arizona by a half game. Major League Baseball's All-Star game is Tuesday night in Seattle. Dodgers right fielder Mookie Betts is competing in today's home run derby. The competition begins at 5 p.m. The All-Star weekend actually kicked off on Friday in Seattle with the new Swingman Classic, an All-Star game for HBCU players. The Swingman Classic was created by Hall of Famer Ken Griffey Jr. 50 players from 28 HBCUs played in the Classic, which is designed to give more exposure for black college players who want to play in the major leagues. Griffey plans to make the Swingman Classic an annual event during All-Star Weekend. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events. We endeavor to be a beacon of hope and understanding, while boldly challenging listeners to think more deeply about difficult topics that impact us all. With this in mind, our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners, so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
Boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
1, 2, 3, go!
Live from Leimert Park, USA, I'm Tavis Smiley. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. So glad to see you and me back in stride again. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. All of our socials can be found at KBLA 1580. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, everything at KBLA 1580. Let me also invite you right now to download our app at KBLA 1580. Download the app right now and listen to us live anywhere in the world in real time. I've been out for a week, and I've been in 4 or 5 different cities over the last 7 or 8 days, and I listened on the app all across America. Everywhere I went, I was tuning into our station on the app. So download the app right now, and anywhere you are in the world. Dominique is back from South Africa, of course. They were listening there on the app. So anywhere you are in the world in real time, you can hear us on KBLA if you download our app right now. at KBLA 1580. Good to be back in this chair today. Let me also invite you to watch the live stream of this program by tapping on the KBLA TV icon on our app or by going to our YouTube channel. And, of course, if you miss this program any day in real time, check out the podcast of our program by going to the app, the website, Anchor, Spotify, Apple, so many places to listen to this program at your leisure vis-a-vis the podcast, should you miss us any day in real time. But I'm delighted, as always, to have you along live with us today for the next 3 hours. Let me also invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, you have to be prepared to die before you can begin to live. Reporter and author Paul Kix joins us to unveil the true story behind one of the most iconic photographs in all of American history. Taken 60 years ago during the turbulent days of 1963 in Birmingham, Alabama. You have no doubt seen this image countless times. A black teenager, a policeman, and his lunging German shepherd. We'll get the story behind that iconic photo 60 years later today in hour two. In our third hour, two conversations. Up first, actress, singer, and philanthropist Holly Robinson Peete on the 25th anniversary of the Holly Rod Foundation's Design Care Gala, shining a light on progress the foundation has helped to advance and fund, I might add, in the Parkinson's and autism spaces. Holly Robinson Peete at the top of hour three. On the B side of hour three, a conversation with Dr. Greg Hammer on how the practice of gratitude can rewire our brains, leading to profound transformations in our lives. Y'all know me, gratitude is the gateway to greatness. We'll talk about gratitude on the B side today of hour three. We commenced, though, in this first hour with two more conversations on the backside of this hour. The CEO of Lendistry, Everett Sands, on the recent jobs report and what the numbers tell us about the economic predicament of black folk in particular. We'll talk money after news, traffic, and sports in this hour. But we begin today's program talking politics with the Democratic strategist and executive director of BlackPAC, Adrianne Shropshire, who, your last name is hard to say if you say it too fast. Shropshire. Adrianne Shropshire, who joins us live in studio right now. Adrianne, good to see you. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
It's good to have you in studio, and I'm glad we got a half hour to walk through a number of things that have been trending over the weekend. And again, I was out last week, so a lot of things I want to get to that I couldn't get to in the last week. I think I want to start with this. This is a sign, I think, of some a strong signal of a democratic unity, I should say. We'll get to the black thing in a second. This week is the 10th anniversary of Black Lives Matter. We'll talk about that in a moment. So I got Black Lives Matter on my brain this morning. But AOC has come out and endorsed Biden's re-election campaign, sending a strong signal of democratic unity. We'll talk about these third-party candidates potentially again in a moment. But this is a good sign because progressives have not been all too happy with President Biden. So your thoughts on what this actually means that AOC has now endorsed Biden for his re-election? Not that she do anything different, I suspect, but it's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is a clear sign of unity, as you said. I also just think it's really clear what the stakes are, right, and increasingly so. And I know that we'll, get to talking about what that means for black folks and how black voters see that. But I think that is precisely in many ways how black voters are seeing this across the country. And we recently did some focus groups where it's very clear how people understand both what the stakes are. They understand, the sort of contrast between the two parties. They're skeptical about third parties. And so I think AOC's endorsement, both clarifies where the party feels like it needs to go and what it needs to be doing in this early moment, right, as opposed to folks waiting until the last minute to endorse.
You mentioned it. I'll follow you. So what are the stakes for black folk in particular as you see it?
So this has been on my mind, what we heard in these groups that we just did a couple of weeks ago. And, I think that what the voters will tell you is at stake is everything from, deep concern around violence in our community to the ongoing continued erosion of rights. And I think that people delineate what those rights are, whether it is the attack on abortion rights and reproductive rights in general, whether it is voting rights, whether it's affirmative action. We happen to be in groups just before the decision came out, and you had the opportunity to ask people, well, what do you think about the court's impending, because of course we all knew that it was going to happen. Asked people what they thought about it, and these are
affirmative action. You mean
affirmative action? Yes, sure. These are motivating issues, right, for Black voters. They're not just there's a whole list of issues that Black voters care about, feel very deeply about, but there are issues that are going to cause them to turn out to the polls, that will motivate them to the polls. Things like affirmative action, things like the reversal of Roe v. Wade, the student loan, catastrophe that just happened in the court. Those are the issues that are going to motivate people to turn out, as well as this sort of overarching sense of the rise and threat of white supremacy to Black folks in their daily lives.
There's a lot to unpack in this half hour. You heard Adrianne mention a moment ago that the data that the BlackPAC has collected suggests that Black folk writ large are skeptical of third parties. What does that mean for Cornel West, who's running as the candidate for the Green Party? He'll be in town later this week to speak at the big Black Lives Matter 10th anniversary party this Saturday. We'll tell you all about that. Dominique and I will be stage host this Saturday to celebrate the 10th anniversary of BLM. So we'll talk about third parties. Just was reading yesterday, over the weekend, Joe Manchin is being tapped by an organization called No Labels. They're looking for a third-party candidate to run against Joe Biden. Joe Manchin is their favorite pick. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about a great deal more as we move through this half hour. I am pleased to be joined by Adrianne Shropshire, who's the head of BlackPAC. You're listening right now to KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. And I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
Yeah, this is Lathan and Tyler. Main reason that's very important for me to be here, just to leave a legacy for my kids. Black wealth, generational wealth is what we need in our community. Oh, Chase, someone has to take the lead. They're showing, big business like Chase cares, and they're putting their money where their mouth is at. So it's good to see, big institution like Chase, giving a lifting hand, to the community, and you got to respect that. It makes me want to bank with Chase, and give them another look. If I go to another institution, I actually see what Chase is doing for the community.
That's right, Chase is doing their part to help advance Black wealth. For more money support, tune in every day from 12 to 2 to KBLA Talk 1580's Midday Money Chain, right here.
If this were a Reese's TV ad, you'd be staring at a Reese's peanut butter cup. And sure, my voice is peanut buttery smooth, but still, you need to see the peanut butter cups, right? No? I can really just say Reese's and you'll go get some? Okay. Reese's. 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 Really working, actually. Reese's. Reese's. I'm on to something. Reese's. Reese's. Reese's.
Want my secret for how to prep for summer getaways and get-togethers and get everything for less? Kohl's. I just went shopping and saved big on sunny day essentials like tees, tank tops, shorts, capris, swimwear, and beach towels. Because for every one I bought, I was able to get a second for only $1. Plus, I earned Kohl's cash. So head to Kohl's and find the top styles for the lowest prices. You'll thank me later. Select styles. Offers in July 13th. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohl's.com for details.
Wendy's is open till midnight or later, so you can give in to the craving and go night mode. Now all of your favorite menu items just got their bedtime extended. You can get what you want even later, like the Baconator with 6 strips of bacon, or the perfect fries and Frosty Duo. If you're up later, then so are we. So go ahead and pull through the drive-thru. When the craving hits, go night mode at Wendy's. Open till midnight or later. All right, see ya later.
At participating U.S. Wendy's, hours may vary.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed with the BlackPAC's Adrianne Shropshire, who we are delighted to have in studio with us to commence today's program. We were talking about a few things before the break. I want to jump right into those things and make the most of our time, Adrianne. I think I want to start with this, with your comment that the data that the BlackPAC has collected of Relate suggests that there is a skepticism that many black people have when it comes to third-party candidates. Unpack that for me.
So I think that what we've seen in our focus groups, really, frankly, since sort of post-2016, is a lot of voters who made the decision either in 2016 to sit out or vote third party, showing up in the focus groups with a real sense of regret, right? And it's interesting because it's both like, I did what I thought I needed to do, but then my mama got mad at me, right?
Yeah.
So this sort of like community accountability was part of it, but also people very much saying like, I didn't realize what was going to happen. I didn't think it would be this bad, and I think that some of it was about just the sort of overwhelming chaos that the last administration brought. The sort of this rise in white supremacy, which I think that people were in some ways stunned by, and really feeling like they had let their community down. And so I think that is still true to this moment where there is sort of this skepticism about what it means. I think that, Dr. West's challenge, because we actually were in focus groups when he announced, I think Dr. West's challenge is that for the most part, when we ask the opinions of the participants in our groups, and this was a sort of a wide-ranging set of demographics, age, economic, educational, gender. For the most part, folks don't know who he is. He is not a household name. And so I think his challenge is you have both that, his people not knowing who he is, but also this sort of skepticism about, well, why, and what will this mean, I think is a challenge for him.
So here's the thing. I find it fascinating that he may not be a household name, but so many people know Dr. West from all the years of teaching and all the years of lecturing and crisscrossing the country. And here's some other data to underscore that point. I was reading a piece this weekend written by David Axelrod. The David Axelrod. For those who are not politically inclined, David Axelrod is the guy that ran Obama's campaign and got Barack Obama elected. Everybody knows David Axelrod. He's sort of a guru. He's what James Carville used to be during the Clinton era, as you recall. I still love James. But everybody, listens. When David Axelrod speaks, people listen because he knows what he's talking about. He got the first black president elected not once, but twice. I say all that to say that Axelrod wrote a piece this weekend saying that Biden and company ought to be concerned about Cornel West. When David Axelrod says that, everybody pays attention to it. So I'm trying to juxtapose David Axelrod's concern that Cornel West may be a threat to Joe Biden on some level with your data taken from black people that people don't know Cornel West. I'm trying to square those two things that don't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think that Democrats are haunted by 2016, and they are haunted by the fact that you had young people in particular willing to vote third party and not for the party nominee Hillary Clinton. I think that haunts them, and I think that their inability to read that going in is still looms large in how they think about what is to come. So I get that Axelrod would raise that concern. What I can say is that when we ask people, they just simply didn't know. And so I think that there is a segment of the electorate that knows Dr. West and has followed him for a long time. I think it's a segment of the progressive community that knows him and has followed him. I'm not sure that translates out broadly.
And I was saying to a friend of mine last night, who shall remain nameless, who may be listening right now, but I said that in some ways, if you're a West fan or if you're Cornel West, if you are in fact Cornel West, who again we'll see this Saturday, we'll talk about that in a moment. You could get a smile on your face, thinking that's a compliment that David Axelrod is suggesting that you may be threatening the president. There's another way to read that. There's a whole other way to read that, as you well know, that David Axelrod just served Cornel West up. And the message is y'all better take him out. Y'all better take him out right now.
That's right.
Before he gains any traction. So there are a couple of different ways to read it. Am I right about that?
I think that is exactly right.
And the church said amen. I think it's the latter. I think Axelrod wasn't complimenting Cornel West. He was serving him up. We shall see. I digress on that. But speaking of third parties, who again, your data suggests that black people don't altogether trust, No Labels is an organization organization that's looking to find a candidate to run on their platform. And their name suggested, No Labels. And so you think about No Labels, you think about a milquetoast guy, respectfully, like Joe Manchin. And so Manchin is the guy they're trying to get to run as their third-party candidate. My point is there are a number of people, before you ever get to Donald Trump, that are going to be nipping at Joe Biden's heels. It could be Cornel West. It could be Joe Manchin. It's Robert Kennedy's already in. He's starting to track in certain places. Of course, there's Marianne Williamson who's out there. But my point is that while we all expect that the president's going to win the Democratic Party nomination, I am not certain as I sit here right now that there won't be some credible third-party challenger who's going to be nipping at his heels, and that has all kinds of tentacles that offshoot that. We won't get into all that right now, but your thought about the fact that there may very well be a credible one or two, could be a couple of them, third-party challengers to President Joe Biden.
I just don't see it. And I think that, we started out talking about AOC's endorsement, and I just think that there will be an overwhelming kind of consolidation of the party that essentially will be to remove or to isolate any challengers. And I think that will come, obviously from the party itself. It'll come from the president's campaign, and it'll come from the vice president. And so I just don't see it. I do think that there's a difference between No Labels, though,
right,
and a Green Party candidate, or even, Robert Kennedy. I just think there's a difference, and the No Labels endeavor, I think, is an attempt to do something very different, which I really feel like it is. When we think about 2020 and even 2016, but the sort of 2020 really, but the sort of effort within the Republican Party, the sort of never Trump folks, right? It just feels to me like the No Labels people are their attempt is to go after those folks who voted for the Democratic nominee, who voted for Joe Biden. There is some attempt to go after that, which obviously is dangerous in this moment, to be peeling off people who rightly said the Republican Party has fallen off a cliff and we can no longer support it. To go after those folks and pull them over, essentially isolating and making their votes irrelevant, is dangerous in a moment like this.
I can only speak for me. No Labels is dangerous for me, period. That's scary because I'm thinking of my friend Jim Hightower down in Texas, who famously said many years ago, the only thing you find in the middle of the road is a dead armadillo. And only a Texan can say that. But I take his point. I don't like folk who are in the middle of the road. My thing is take a side.
Right.
So No Labels.
In this moment in particular.
Exactly.
Take a side.
Exactly. Yeah. So No Labels just does not fascinate me at all. And Joe Manchin certainly does not fascinate me at all.
Well, and we know who he is, right? Like, and so if we're saying that No Labels, that he represents and his policy positions represent No Labels, then we know that's just a non-starter.
Yep. We mentioned Cornel West a moment ago. I'll come back to that only because this Saturday he's one of the many featured speakers at the 10th anniversary of Black Lives Matter. It's called the People's Justice Festival. This station is the exclusive partner of this festival. Dominique DePrima, my colleague and yours truly, will be the main stage host most of the day this Saturday, 12 to 6 p.m. right here, adjacent to our studios in Leimert Park, as we celebrate 10 years of Black Lives Matter. Cornel West takes the stage just after 4:30, but all day long there are great speakers, there are performances, a great deal happening this Saturday as we celebrate again the 10th anniversary of this organization. One could argue, Adrian, that not since the Civil Rights Movement has any black entity had the impact that BLM has had. As we approach the actual 10th anniversary is the 13th. So just a couple of days from now. What's today? The 11th? Something like that? Yeah, so just a couple, the 10th, whatever. So a couple of days from now on the 13th is the actual 10th anniversary of BLM. But they'll be celebrating this Saturday in Leimert Park with thousands of folk. And I'm told BLM chapters all across the country are descending on LA this weekend. So it should be a great day outside in Leimert Park this Saturday. But what do you make of the impact they have had now? Hard to believe it's been 10 years already.
It is hard to believe it's been 10 years. I think the global impact of Black Lives Matter movement is undeniable. I think that when we look at not just the ways in which folks here from the moment the hashtag went out. When we think about the work that's been done to establish organizations across the country, when we think about how it has changed the way that we talk about police violence, who is engaged in the conversation around police violence, their impact is just undeniable. It has changed the way that young people have gotten activated and involved. When we think about this generation and what is motivating their participation in our politics today, there are a few things. There is gun violence. There is police violence. There is abortion rights and reproductive rights. But their dedication, right, to continuing to raise the issue about racial justice, and in particular the ways in which policing plays out in Black communities is, we've seen what that impact is. We saw it in 2020. We saw not just younger Black folks, right? I think one of the things when we talk about the impact of Black Lives Matter is simply looking at those protests in 2020, where there were protests where there wasn't a Black person in sight, right? Where suburban white mothers were organizing their own protests in the name of Black Lives Matter. So when we think about the impact, it has caused a cultural shift and a shift in the way that we talk about policing and policy. We think about the fact the United States Senate was debating, removing qualified immunity. That is the result of this movement. That is the result of the work of these organizations and these activists across the country for the last 10 years.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry about that. I should mention that every day this week we're going to have a featured guest on our program talking about the 10th anniversary of BLM. So every single day this week for at least a half hour or so, we'll be talking about the impact of BLM 10 years later. That impact is controversial, no question about that. But we'll talk about it every single day this week as we lead up to this Saturday, the People's Justice Festival here in Los Angeles, in Leimert Park, 12 to 6 p.m., celebrating the 10th anniversary of BLM. Speaking of Black Lives Mattering and Black people writ large, I am fascinated, just watching my timer, just a few minutes left to cover a couple of things, fascinated by, over the last few years, the increasing number of Black people who feel empowered, and it's a good thing, to run for the U.S. Senate, where there historically have been so few African Americans, more in the House, clearly not so many in the Senate. Our friend Hill Harper, the actor Hill Harper, announced today he's running for Senate in the state of Michigan. He bought a house there some years ago. He's been living there for a while now, but Hill Harper has thrown his hat in the ring for a U.S. Senate seat in the state of Michigan. You recall the last cycle, there were a number of Black folk running for the Senate in Florida, in North Carolina, in Wisconsin, and now Hill Harper, actor, Harvard educated, was there with Obama when Obama went to law school, so he's clearly credentialed, smart guy, politically active, but Hill Harper now is running for the Senate on the Democratic ticket in the state of Michigan. Your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I think he falls in line with a number of folks, some of whom you've mentioned, who have stepped up to run for statewide office in general, and for the U.S. Senate in particular. I think that America is in crisis, and has been in crisis, and seems to be continuing to go down that path. And you have Black folks who are saying, we will step up, we'll stand in the gap, and we'll provide leadership for this country. And I think that those who choose to run for the United States Senate are clearly saying that, are clearly saying, I will have the courage to say that I will go into that institution, as challenging as it is, and help to right the ship. And I think that, the more folks who do that, I think the better, off will be, both because, we need a diversity of ideas in the United States Senate in particular. You have that in the House. In the Senate, not so much. And we need Black voices. We need Black women in the Senate, which there is none after the vice president. And so, we know that there are 3 Black women running right now for Senate seats. And, at least one of them will become a United States Senator, if not 2.
Yep. In the 90 seconds I have left here, a quick thought on voting rights. We've been talking about voting rights ad infinitum, ad nauseum. Nothing's actually happened in that U.S. Senate that you were just referencing. But in the coming days now, they're going to be competing voting bills. Your thoughts on the issue of voting bills, voting rights in the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in order for us to have a legislation pass the United States Senate, we need to increase the number of Democratic senators in the United States Senate. And that's just the reality of it, including taking back the House, et cetera, getting Joe Biden reelected. So I think that that's just the reality of it. There are the ways in which the right is trying to undermine voting, to undermine democracy. Really, we should think about it in three ways. One is they're trying to stop registration and making registration easy, and there's lots of bills focused on that. There are voter suppression laws trying to stop people from getting to the ballot box, and then there's just undermining elections themselves. Yeah. And so when we think about voting rights and democracy in this country, we really have to stay focused on those three things.
She is Adrianne Shropshire. She is the executive director of BlackPAC, Democratic Strategist. Pleased to have her in studio. Would not be the last time she joins us, particularly as we move ever closer to the 2024 elections. I'm glad you're just around the corner, so you can pop in when we need you. I will see you again soon. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for having me.
When we come forward after news, traffic, and sports, we'll talk money with Everett Sands of Lendistry. You're listening right now. We're glad about it to KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Thank you for joining us here on the Black Information Network. I'm Mike Moore. Now, here's the latest. Disgraced former sports doctor Larry Nassar is reportedly in stable condition after being stabbed several times during an altercation at a federal prison where he's been locked up in Florida. Sources with knowledge of the incident say it happened on Sunday and involved just one other inmate. Nassar was sentenced to decades in prison for sexually assaulting female athletes when he worked at USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University. A fire at a Texas church is being investigated as a possible arson. Flames torched the Christ Redeeming Community Church in San Antonio, which serves a historically black neighborhood. It started just before midnight. Fire crews say the blaze began on an outside wall, but they're not saying how. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Seeing a slow and go drive as you travel Pomona. It's going to be a wreck trying to clear in South LA and Claremont. Look out for the metal chain in traffic lanes on the 10 East at Indian Hill Boulevard. There's a metal chain in the right lane. Don't want to strike that. West Covina on the 10 East at Vincent Glendora. Looks like a wreck from earlier sitting on the right side. South LA, it's going to be a collision in the carpool lane, the 105 West approaching the 110. Carpool lane blocked with a crash. We're loaded up from the 710. Pomona, it's a signal alert on the 60 West approaching the 71. The carpool lane and two left lanes blocked with this crash. And a busy drive from Vineyard.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the accident guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? The accident guys can come to you almost anywhere, so you don't have to come to us. Se habla español.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers take a 4-game winning streak into the All-Star break. They're back in first place in the NL West for the first time since June 5th. They lead Arizona by a half game. Major League Baseball's All-Star game is Tuesday night in Seattle. Dodgers right fielder Mookie Betts is competing in today's home run derby. The competition begins at 5 p.m. The All-Star weekend actually kicked off on Friday in Seattle with the new Swingman Classic, an All-Star game for HBCU players. The Swingman Classic was created by Hall of Famer Ken Griffey Jr. 50 players from 28 HBCUs played in the Classic, which is designed to give more exposure for black college players who want to play in the major leagues. Griffey plans to make the Swingman Classic an annual event during All-Star Weekend. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The other talk stations?
All day, all night, all white.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we sound like the city looks. Now celebrating 2 years of amplifying black and progressive voices. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Want my secret for how to prep for summer getaways and get-togethers and get everything for less? Get to Kohl's. I just went and saved an extra 20% on sunny day essentials, like tees for my husband for $9.99, an adorable sport for my daughter, plus all the grilling tools we needed for a great barbecue. So get to Kohl's and save on cool finds for hot days. You'll thank me later. Select styles, 20% offer ends July 9. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohl's.com for details.
On your period, sudden gushes happen without warning. But now, you can say goodbye to stand-up gush fears. thanks to Always Ultra Thins with rapid dry technology. It absorbs gushes 2 times faster than the leading store brand and gives you up to 100% leak-free protection. Hello, clean and comfortable with Always Fear No Gush.
Hosting a barbecue is a breeze, but managing my frequent heartburn, that was a lot more work. I would chew up to 10 antacids in one day. Now I take just one Prilosec OTC, and my heartburn is blocked for a full 24 hours. Just one Prilosec OTC a day gives me one-and-done heartburn relief, so I can go back for seconds on my world-famous burgers.
Prilosec OTC. 1 pill a day, 24 hours, 0 heartburn. It's possible while taking Prilosec OTC. Use as directed for 14 days to treat frequent heartburn, not for immediate relief.
Discover credit cards automatically double all the cash back you earn at the end of your first year, which means... Wait, hold up. Question for the audio engineer.
Go ahead.
Did I read that right? Discover automatically doubles all your cash back?
Yeah, that's what the script says.
So if I get a Discover card right now, I can earn twice the cash back.
Apparently. Wait! Unlimited first-year cash back match. Only from Discover. See terms and learn more at discover.com/match.
At Lowe's, we're always bringing pros more ways to save. Right now, get up to 40% off select bathroom faucets and vanities. Plus, buy Southwire Romex Simple 12-gauge indoor wire at our everyday low price of $109. Head to your local Lowe's or visit us at Lowe's.com for more deals you can't beat. Because Lowe's knows savings, Lowe's knows pros. Valid 7/6 through 7/12 while supplies last. Selection varies by location. U.S. only.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
You got a big mouth.
Hello, Joe, you're up. Welcome.
We're unapologetically progressive, and we don't black down.
I'm Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Glad to have you tuned in this first hour today. As promised, the conversation now with Everett Sands, the CEO of Lendistry, unpacking the latest U.S. jobs report, which shows a drop in the unemployment rate to 3.6% in June, down from, 3.7 in May. So there's a slight drop, but there's still gains in unemployment for minority workers, with African Americans now seeing several months of weaker employment. On some level, Everett, this is no surprise, but every time I see these numbers, it just depresses me. Your thoughts, sir? Good to have you on again.
Hey, Tavis, good to have you on. Happy Monday. I think it's things that we've talked about before, right? It's kind of understanding the game and understanding where the market is going. So maybe we start with just talking about kind of where the market is going and what we see.
Okay.
I think the first thing is to understand what companies are doing. And the way I tend to think about it is you got to know who are the big companies and who are the real decision makers. So if you love sports, right, there's an owners meeting, right? And if we take one sport in particular, let's take football. Let's just choose a sport. It would be like Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft making a decision. And if you notice, what happens is when those two guys make a decision, most of the other owners kind of fall in line.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the financial world, in the corporate world, that's Jamie Dimon.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie Dimon a year ago said things like, we're going to have tightened markets. Everybody needs to come to work. We need to pay attention to these economic signs. And I think as Black people, what we have to do, and as people in general, what we have to do is we got to kind of clue into what that means. So I'm going to give you a couple of things that I see.
Before you do that, we should mention, this, obviously, because your field, Jamie Dimon is the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase. So Everett Sands, his point is that when Jamie Dimon speaks, people listen, kind of like E.F. Hutton back in the day. But in the banking industry, He is right. When Jamie Dimon says something, everybody in banking sort of pays attention. So, again, for those who don't know the name Jamie Dimon, I always want to make sure we're on the same page. He's the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase. That said, Everett, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and you're right. And I should probably close that thought. So not only did Jamie Dimon or Chase say it, but then Wells said it, and then all of a sudden Citi says and Bank of America says. So just if you think about that in terms of economic prowess, when $10 to $12 trillion says this is what we're going to do, everybody else must fall in line because either you are borrowing from them, you're banking with them, or you plan to borrow from them, right? And so what they essentially said is that companies are going to hire less. Now, what does that mean? Most people during the pandemic took an opportunity to do a couple things. The first thing they took an opportunity to do was look at other jobs they could get in an effort to get a pay raise. Let me be clear in saying to you, you should do what's best for you. But when companies start hiring less, what that means is that job hopping has to stop,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that means as an individual, you got to start focusing on sustainability. What do I need to do to become the number one employee of the month kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
What do I need to do to hit my numbers, show up on time, kind of show that extra effort? Because now we're going back a little bit to old school, again, led by the kind of 4 banking institutions making this decision. Second thing, companies are starting to right size because of higher interest rates. We knew that when the Fed raised interest rates, and what that means, just to make it plain, is the interest rates that companies pay when they borrow on their debt increases, which means they have a higher, expense, and they're going to look to cut the cost somewhere. Now, unfortunately, what we've seen historically is that usually affects our community more than others. But we just have to be conscious of what happens when there are higher interest rates. This goes into a variety of different things. We can go off into politics and talk about voting. We can go off into just thinking about how you plan. We can also go off into people who are running P&Ls and how they should think about managing their own expenses in their individual departments as leaders inside of a company, which we have many Black leaders doing.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing, I think, is companies are starting to look more aggressively at accountability. And so what I mean by that is metrics and accountability. Remember, you got financial people at the top saying this is what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And what do? They run all their companies by numbers. And so if your sales are down or, there's some lacking in efficiency or anything like that, I know this doesn't necessarily, hit us right between the eyes and say this is the specific problem that is within the Black community. But my goal here is to talk about what's the bar talk and bar conversation going on behind the scenes so that we can be empowered, have the knowledge, and to react accordingly so we don't lose any jobs or we save a person who's about to be cut when we're the leader of that group.
Let me go back to your first point, which is powerful, which I think relates most to everyday people, listening to this program right now, and that is this notion of how the job hopping has to stop. We live in a moment, we live in a culture, of course, where people don't do what they did 100 years ago, 50 years ago. You don't get on one job and stay there until you retire. People are constantly changing jobs. They're trading jobs, if you will. They get one job, they get a better offer, and they move someplace else, or they don't like what they do and they decide to leave and find something else. So for a lot of reasons, there's a lot of job hopping. Your first point is that job hopping has to stop right now. So if you're an African American right now and you're not happy where you are, and by the way, I was reading some data not long ago that suggests that the overwhelming majority of Black folk in this country, Everett, are not happy with the jobs they have. But if you're one of those Black people right now who's at a job and you're not happy, I just heard you say don't be so quick to job hop. Unpack that for me a bit more.
Yeah, so I like to use sports analogy because we have a tendency in our community to understand sports analogies a little bit better. Sometimes there's a player option, and sometimes there's a team option. You got to know which economic cycle you're in. We're going from a player option to a team option. And so, I don't really want to focus so much on being unhappy at the job because I think unhappy, there's a lot of different reasons for being unhappy, but I also think there's a lot of ways you can make yourself happy, right? I tend to think that it really falls into 3 things: compensation, quality of life, and career. And generally speaking, we're focused on one of those 3 at different moments in our lives. And so you got to figure out which one of those 3 are making you unhappy. Career, maybe you want to accelerate, you want to get a higher position. What can you do to better yourself? Quality of life, maybe you want to take off on Fridays and you want to do something different and you need a job that caters to that. Or maybe you just need to leave work at a certain period of time and start a little bit earlier, shift your day.
Right.
And then, compensation is obviously compensation, right? And there's a variety of different things associated with that. But what I am saying to you most importantly is you got to understand when there's a player option, a team option, we're coming into a team option moment. Now, you've heard other people talk about things like this. First one, last one hired, first one fired. That's team option, right? That means that when the market starts to turn and people start to think about laying people off, they look at who was the last one that they hired. Now we're out there hopping jobs because we're trying to get a higher compensation, and we happen to be the last one. We just walked into the team option where the team is already saying, I'm cutting people.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I want to make sure we're aware of.
So let me ask it more expressly. Given that Black people are perennially unemployed at a higher number, or perennially underemployed at a much higher number, if companies, to your point now, are in a moment where they're going to be hiring less, what does that ultimately do to the jobless number for Black people in particular?
Well, I don't want us to also be afraid of the jobless number because we're also the ones creating more businesses right now than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want us to recognize that part of what you're seeing in the numbers is us making a decision to be self-employed. And so that doesn't immediately reflect in the numbers accordingly. But I want to say the solution to this is we have to have more ownership, right? We've got to start our own companies. We've got to get access to capital. Obviously, I'm heavily involved in that at Lendistry.
Sure.
And we got to start taking commands of the reins on our own. Once we take commands on the reins of our own and we start starting companies, we have a tendency to hire more people that look like us, educate more people that look like us, and then pass the wealth down from a generational perspective, either inside the family or outside the family, because we have a tendency to sell to people who look like us. Yeah. So I think there's multiple ways that we can be combating this as well.
When we come forward, I want to come back to this issue of ownership that Everett Sands just puts his finger on, suggesting that we, black people, are starting businesses, sole proprietorships mostly, of course, but we're starting businesses faster than anybody else. And I want to know what that means. And I raise that because, we're now celebrating 2 years of KBLA Talk 1580. We just crossed over into year 3. And I've said many times, trust me on this, a startup is a startup is a startup. It could be a mom and pop. It could be a radio station, but all the factors are the same. It's difficult. There are long hours. You're underfunded, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so on the one hand, I am buoyed by the fact, I'm happy to hear, that African Americans are starting businesses at a faster clip than others, and that in fact may say something to Everett's point about this about these numbers that we're dissecting in this hour in the recent jobs report. On the other hand, again, because a startup is a startup is a startup, I am concerned in a moment like this about those businesses that start and don't succeed. There's a high rate of that as well, failure of these African-American owned businesses. So we'll talk about that when we come forward. We're talking right now with Everett Sands, the CEO of Lendistry, on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
The family of Keenan Anderson is suing the city of Los Angeles for $100 million. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News, brought to you by CaliforniaBlackMedia.org. Keenan Anderson, a high school English teacher that was visiting Los Angeles from Washington, D.C., was tragically killed at the hands of the Los Angeles Police Department in January of this year. His family, alongside civil rights and personal injury attorney Benjamin Crump and Carl Douglas, have announced a $100 million lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles. Crump and Douglas are representing Keenan Anderson's son, Sincere Anderson, and his mother, Gabrielle Hansel. The family is suing for civil rights violations, assault and battery, false imprisonment, and negligence on the part of the LAPD officers. The family of Keenan Anderson and attorneys Crump and Douglas want it to be known that this is only part of a systemic issue within the fabric of police departments everywhere.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your beer. Follow the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Need a fresh start? LADWP income qualified customers can get up to $15,000 tax-free to pay overdue water utility bills with the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. Benefit amounts may vary and will not impact other benefits. Visit LADWP.com/cares and apply today. That's LADWP.com/cares.
You're ready to level up to your next home or your first home, but maybe you still have some questions. Come check out Rocket. We're ready to help. Start with a Rocket Mortgage home buying plan and get Rocket rewards along the way for cash toward closing. You got this, and Rocket's got you. Only with Rocket. Visit RocketBuyingPlan.com to get started today.
Call 866-357-5727 for conditions and restrictions. Equal housing lender license in all 50 states. NMLS Consumer Access.org number 3030.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley and Everett Sands, the CEO of Lendistry on KBLA Talk 1580. So, Everett, I said a moment ago, following you, that there are a number of African Americans, and the data suggests that we're starting businesses, mostly sole proprietors, as I said earlier, proprietorships, at a faster clip than others. But that also means potentially a higher failure rate of these businesses. Before I get to that, I want to break this into pieces. Let me start by how you read the fact, as we're talking about the recent job numbers, African Americans, again, at a faster clip than others, are starting new businesses. Question one, how do you read that?
Well, I mean, essentially, the way I tend to think of it is I just look over a certain year period and just say, okay, what's the increase? Mm-hmm. Black-owned businesses a 13.64% increase. Other nationalities and races are at 0.53. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you really sit back and think about it. Now, look, we had the blip during the pandemic, and I definitely don't mean to make it light by any means, but many a times I got to ask, what does this mean? A lot of our businesses are closing, and I would say that we're pretty resilient people. We can go back several hundred years and talk about that, right? But I think just generally speaking, we know how to make it through the storms.
Yep. Second question, breaking this into pieces. What do you make of the fact that most of these businesses are sole proprietorships?
There's no doubt about that we start off in smaller businesses, 1-2 person employee businesses. 8 out of 10 of our businesses sell in 18 months. And that's also, we'll just piggyback on what we talked about before, that's also my stay at your job concept. Because I tend to think that a lot of the reason why we are unhappy is because we think we can do it better. And I think we're actually right, one. I think, 2, we do have a desire for self-employment, whether we call it a side hustle, a hobby, or true employment. I do believe it's just naturally inside of us to try to work something, another job out, right, which today we can call sole proprietorship. And I think we need to recognize that. And when you recognize that, it takes careful planning. Because if you look what takes the 80% of the companies down, it's healthcare, it's finances, and different things like that. If they have stability, and stability could look like a lot of things. We always talk about investment. Yes, that's one thing, to start your company with a certain amount of money. But the second thing is having friends with you that are supporting you, angel investors, different things like that. Yes, I know we don't always have a lot of that. But the third one, which I think is kind of the unforgotten one, is staying at the current job while you're building the business. And there's something to be said about that and said for that. And when we look at some of these businesses that are succeeding, it's all about the game plan and how they're filling in the holes that they have in their financial path or access to capital path.
Yeah.
I think we could get smarter about that.
No, I get it. I would assume that if we're starting businesses faster than other communities, that we're probably failing faster as well. It goes hand in hand, does it not?
Sure, that's natural. Yeah, that's natural. That's right.
Yeah, I figured as much. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Everett Sands, I want to get his take on the interest rates. He mentioned earlier high interest rates. I want to just get his take as a banker, as the CEO of Lendistry, how he reads these interest rates that all the rest of us are being subject to. We'll get that and a couple more things before we lose him at the top of the hour. You're listening to Everett Sands, CEO of Lendistry, on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to here with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
Don't settle for bumps, ingrowns, and itch due to dry skin. Venus for Pubic Hair and Skin is here with the only razor and regimen specifically designed for your pubic area, featuring a razor with a patented irritation defense bar and skincare regimen that is dermatologist and gynecologist tested. Venus helps protect your pubic skin from shave irritation. Visit GilletteVenus.com to learn more about our full regimen of products.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Have you heard about Lendistry? Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered right here in LA. Once you've started your business, Lendistry provides flexible financing options starting at $50,000 to help you access the affordable capital needed to grow. Whether financing is needed to increase working capital, acquire a business, purchase inventory and equipment, or refinance debt, Lendistry has a solution for you. Lending products range from traditional business term loans and non-revolving lines of credit to SBA 7A loans and commercial real estate financing. Lendistry's pre-application process is simple and does not impact your credit score. Visit lendistry.com/KBLA to learn more and to get started with an application right from the website.
Black Lives Matters turns 10, and KBLA Talk 1580 is proud to be the exclusive media partner of the People's Justice Festival. This Saturday, July 15th, 12 to 6 p.m. in Leimert Park. Come join us as we celebrate the life-saving and history-making work of Black Lives Matter to help bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice. There will be live music performances, a children's village, giveaways, vendors, a healing justice space, Skillshare, and amazing speakers including Green Party presidential candidate Dr. Cornel West, live on stage at 4:30 p.m. For more information, go to blmgrassroots.org. That's www.blmgrassroots.org. Dominique DePrima and Tavis Smiley will be main stage hosts throughout the day, and the KBLA Talk 1580 delegation will be out in full force. So, join us this Saturday, July 15th, 12 to 6 p.m. in Leimert Park as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of Black Lives Matter. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. Interrogating your assumptions
and expanding your inventory of ideas.
Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Before I close by asking Everett Sands, the CEO of Lendistry, his thoughts and advice specific for black folk about how to navigate this particular moment, given the jobs report we've been discussing in this hour. I want to start by asking his take on interest rates. This is what you do every day at Lendistry. So what do you make of these interest rates, and how are they impacting and affecting what Lendistry is doing, Everett Sands?
Yeah, sure. So we're watching the market and watching, obviously, Chairman Fed Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve, who will make that decision on where interest rates go. We're expecting a 50 basis points, so a 0.50% hike over the rest of the year, probably split into two, a quarter hike and another quarter hike. We assume they're probably going to be in Q3. So sometimes before September 30th, just because there's a tendency not to do it towards the end of the year. And obviously we got a very, election cycle that's about to start here at the end of the year into next year. So that's what we think about. But I want to tell people, never be afraid of interest rates and never be afraid of borrowing money. It's all about what you're going to do with the money, right? So for my business owners out there, are you about to get a new contract you can execute on? Are you investing in people, property, or technology? For those who are thinking about personal finances, are you writing off enough money in terms of your interest on your primary residence and things like that where you could be taking a tax benefit? So I want us to never be afraid of money. I never want us to be afraid of where money's at in terms of interest rates. I want us always to be focused on what we're going to do with the money, because that's the key.
Mm-hmm. And how's Lendistry as an entity navigating this present moment?
Well, we're doing the same thing, right? We're talking to some of our creditors and saying, okay, when should we have an adjustable rate versus a fixed rate? How do we, obviously it impacts our borrowers. So we're looking at some of the state programs and doing some what we call a blended rate model. That's where we take some money down from the state and then use it in with our current creditors. And then we blend the rates together to try to keep rates pretty whole. We're trying to do that around the country. So we've got a couple of states that have already agreed. Maryland, New York, and several others. And we got some other states that will agree, I think, in the near term, because everybody's worried about affordability for small businesses, homeowners, et cetera. So the other thing we're doing is we're working on with the policy people out there in various state governments, federal governments, et cetera, and saying, look, we got to be careful of this because it can get out of control pretty quickly.
Here's the exit question. What's your view of the state of the economy right now?
You know, we haven't went into a deep recession or depression, which I think is good. I think this is somewhat of a slow death in terms of the way the interest rates are rising. So I think we got to be very careful. But I prefer slow because I think it allows us to plan strategically and think about things. I'm never afraid of an economy we can plan for. I'm afraid of one where we can't. And that's why you hear me trying to really encourage your listeners to say, okay, what's our plan? What are we trying to execute on here? And then how do we carry that through? Because I think that's what everyone is doing in other communities, and we can get a little bit sharper on in our own community.
Yep. I love hearing from him, and I hope you appreciate hearing from an African-American in the banking industry, as it were. He's the CEO of Lendistry, and I love, again, having his insights as an insider. And he will join us again not too far down the road. But for now, we thank Everett Sands of Lendistry for his time today. Everett, have a great rest of the day, man. I appreciate you.
You too, man. Have a great week. Talk soon.
Likewise. When we come forward after news, traffic, and sports, another hour of Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for joining us here on the Black Information Network. I'm Mike Moore. Now, here's the latest. Disgraced former sports doctor Larry Nassar is reportedly in stable condition after being stabbed several times during